Grüße von hier aus Nürnberg. Mein Name ist Christoph Kumper. Ich darf bei Axonius seit letztem Jahr im August unseren Kunden im deutschsprachigen Raum zur Hand gehen, zusammen mit dem David Bradley, der den Vortrag jetzt gleich auf Englisch halten wird. Betreuen wir hier unsere Partner, auch unsere Endkunden mit dem Thema Axonius. Axonius ist eine Lösung zum Thema Asset-Hygiene, zum Thema Asset Intelligence, Cyber Asset Intelligence. Das Thema Asset ist jetzt auch wirklich schon was man eigentlich schon längst im Griff haben sollte. Trotzdem ist es auch heute noch schwierig, Fragen zu beantworten, wie viele Geräte habe ich eigentlich von dem Typ und von dem anderen Typ? Oder welche Benutzer machen denn hier eigentlich was und sind wo angemeldet? Das sind alles Dinge, die stecken in ganz vielen unterschiedlichen Datenbanken, in sogenannten Asset-Informationssilos, so nennen wir das, im Unternehmen. Aber wenn man explizit Fragen hat, muss man dann erst wieder zum jeweiligen Silo, zur jeweiligen Asset-Quelle gehen und dort nachfragen. Und was Axonius macht, ist, dass es diese ganze Information einsammelt, in der Mitte in einem zentralen Register einheitlich darstellt, dedupliziert und normalisiert und indiziert, dass man schön suchen kann und korreliert alle Informationen, die über die Assets gefunden werden. Und dann hat man dort eine Möglichkeit, an diesem zentralen Register Abfragen zu stellen. Und diese Abfragen liefern Antworten. Und immer dann, wenn eine Abfrage eine unerwartete Antwort liefert, dann kann man auch eine automatische Aktion machen. Dann kann man eine E-Mail verschicken, dann kann man ein Ticket lostreten, dann kann man einen Eintrag in die CMDB machen oder ein PowerShell-Skript starten oder irgendwas anderes, einfach um dann auch darauf zu reagieren. Das ist also die Mission von Axonius, dieses Asset Registry zu bilden. Heute sprechen wir über einen ganz speziellen Aspekt des Assets, nämlich das Software as a Service Asset. Das ist ja jetzt Software, die wir nicht mehr selbst auf unseren Geräten oder vielleicht auch auf Geräten in der Cloud betreiben, sondern das ist Software, die ganz andere Menschen für uns betreiben und die wir ganz einfach nutzen können, indem wir nämlich eine Kreditkarte aus der Tasche ziehen, sei es eine eigene oder noch eine Corporate Credit Card und uns einfach für unsere kleine Abteilung mit 3 Mitarbeitern so eine Applikation kaufen, weil die uns das Leben leichter macht. Und dann wird Consent gegeben, dann wird zugestimmt, dass man also bestimmte Daten an diese Applikation senden darf. Dann wird unter Umständen vielleicht noch mit einem Kalender verbunden oder mit einer Kontakteliste, die dann Zugriff auf andere SaaS-Applikationen notwendig macht. Und schwuppdiwupp fließen also Daten aus einer sanktionierten SaaS-Applikation, beispielsweise Office 365, in eine, die IT und Security gar nicht kennt. Und diese SaaS-Applikationen nennen wir die Fourth-Party-Meshes oder Fourth-Party-Business Applications. Und die sind aber ganz, ganz wichtig zu erkennen, wenn es um Fragen geht, wie ist denn eigentlich meine komplette SaaS-Landschaft ausgeprägt? Was benutzen die Leute denn bei mir? Sanktioniert habe ich einen bestimmten Teil. Zugriff auf diesen Teil habe ich gegeben durch eine Identity- und Access-Lösung, habe das auch sauber konfiguriert. Aber was hält die Leute davon ab, sich direkt an SaaS-Applikationen anzumelden und auch ganz noch weitere zu benutzen, von denen wir gar nichts wissen? Also diese Frage der SaaS Discovery ist sehr wichtig, aber auch die Frage, wie sind diese ganzen SaaS-Applikationen konfiguriert? Was ist erlaubt und was ist verboten? Wo fließen vielleicht sogar erhöhte Rechte mit ein? Wo fließen Daten aus bestehenden sanktionierenden Applikationen irgendwo hin, wo wir es gar nicht wissen und die Datenspeicher sind dann nicht mehr in der EU, sondern in China oder sonst irgendwo? Das ist die zweite wichtige Frage, also wie ist das alles konfiguriert? Und das Allerwichtigste ist, was bedeutet es in dem größeren Kontext von Assets für meine Security, wenn heute eine Applikation wie Zoom, die wir gerade nutzen, gebreached wird? Dass ich es einfach einschätzen kann als Unternehmen, dass ich sagen kann, wie groß ist das Risiko, Zoom zu benutzen? Sollten wir lieber Teams nehmen? Und um solche Entscheidungen treffen zu können, gibt es von Axonius die SaaS-Management-Lösung, die Ihnen der David Bradley jetzt gleich vorstellen wird. Die Sache dauert bis 16 Uhr. Wir werden aber vorher noch ein bisschen Zeit lassen, damit Sie uns eventuell noch die eine oder andere Frage stellen können. Und wenn Sie möchten, können Sie uns auch gerne unterbrechen während dem Vortrag und dann gehen wir auf Ihre Fragen ein. So switching to English now, thanks David for your patience. I was trying to set up the topic of SaaS in the context of Axonius and asset management, asset hygiene in general. now over to you. You have something for us, going a little bit deeper into SaaS management of Axonius, right?
Yep, perfect. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so I suppose just an introduction. I'm sure it's already been done, but to do it for myself, my name is David Bradley, sales engineer here in Axonius, and work with Christoph and the guys in Akayo in region as well. Today, the topic we're going to cover is around SaaS security. Why is it becoming a priority? And we're going to start to look at a bunch of different aspects within this, understanding the challenges that people have today around SaaS management in general, the concept of Shadow SaaS and what that is and what impact that has on security, understanding your SaaS security posture. And what I mean by that is, when we think of compliance frameworks and things like that, the shared responsibility model of who owns what in terms of securing the data, how do you stack up against that? How do you report on that and look on that? And then lastly, we'll talk about reducing your SaaS spend. And we'll see some stats around that and where to make cost savings, and sometimes pretty significant cost savings with a very easy overview. So if you've seen any of my webinars before, we usually start off with a couple of tweets just to kind of encapsulate the problem here, right? And there's a couple of tweets that I picked out here where Ian Landsman says, the number of SaaS applications it takes to run another SaaS app is horrifying, right? And it was put up in a humorous way, but it is true, right? And this talks around the concept of what we call, and you'll hear me talk about this, SaaS sprawl, right? So where someone has an application and it's using other extensions and other applications to process data, and it really starts to sprawl out your data across your ecosystems on applications you don't even know are running in your environment. And that is a real growing concern when we think of security, right? And it breaches into that Shadow SaaS area, which I'll dive a bit deeper into. And Jerry Beeson, he's an Axonius advisor, CISO Capital One, and he tweeted kind of a similar to our Chasm solution, which I'll just brief on later on, around how or what does our SaaS consumption look like? And depending on what team you go to, they have different visibilities. And that's another problem, which is this discovery piece of SaaS applications. Do you know what SaaS apps are running in your environment, the ones that are sanctioned and you expect, as well as the ones that you didn't expect? Quite often when we talk about SaaS, it's interdepartmental procurement systems, like your sales team or your development team have applications that, they're obviously not going to know about each other, and they have their own budgets and things like that. So trying to get a handle on that, and there's a whole aspect of cost savings and security, which we'll dive further into as we go through. But this kind of encapsulates the problem, the discovery piece, and then the control piece around security and risk. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk around key challenges. We're also going to talk around maybe some of the current approaches that are there today, what people are using, maybe where the shortcomings are with those, and their limitations. We'll talk about how a new comprehensive approach could levitate that security program when we talk about SaaS and SaaS management. A couple of stats just to throw up, and these come from our case studies and white paper reports, all available to download. But I just picked out a few that were particularly interesting, which was 50% has been the increase over the last 2 years on net spend on SaaS applications. And for the first time, ever, SaaS spend is more than infrastructure as a service spend in a lot of cases, right? Which just means, it's been widely adopted as SaaS applications as de facto standard for processes in people's organizations. 76% of IT professionals see unsanctioned applications as a risk, right? So if there's a huge growing number of applications and the majority of IT professionals and security professionals see it as a risk, it's starting to creep to the top around SaaS security. 137, that is the average number of applications or SaaS applications that we see per organization. And that can be quite shocking to some people and not so shocking for others, but it can be shocking for some people who think they only have 30, 40 applications through their Okta or whatever they have across their organization, to then find out that there's actually 3-4 times that actually running. And we'll talk around how that happens in a moment as well. But the idea being that there's a lot of applications you don't know about that that are running as extensions or separately owned applications by individuals in your organization. And lastly, 30%, what we're seeing from reports is SaaS, 30% of your spend on SaaS is wasted, right? So there's cost savings. It could be significantly more than 30, less than 30, but on average, 30% is the SaaS spend that is wasted. And that comes from a various number of reasons. One being underused licenses, one being orphaned accounts, right? Accounts that are just created locally using up licenses but have no function really in the organization. Unused accounts or excess licenses, and just overpriced applications as well, right? You may have a situation where you have application A in one department and application B in another department, and both applications do pretty much the same functionality. Maybe they're different vendors or whatnot, and combining those, into one single application could have significant reduce of costs on your premium subscription for those applications. There's a whole host of things around this that we'll dive a little bit further into. So some of the key challenges I want to highlight, and we'll step through these, is interconnectivity and data sprawl. You heard me mention that term data sprawl earlier on. And really this comes from, imagine you're going about your day-to-day and you have applications running or extensions enabled in your Chrome browsers and things like that, just to do your day-to-day tasks. Maybe you've brought them with you from a previous company that helped to do your day-to-day, or extensions or applications and extensions that other applications use, right? So you may be using an application and unaware that application is actually then using third and fourth party applications to do functions as well. But you don't see that at the forefront. It's happening in the back end. And that introduces data sprawl. And it becomes increasingly difficult to answer those questions around, well, where is my data residing at any given moment, right? Where is it getting processed? And what is it processing? Is it, where is personal information and identifiable information getting processed? Who has access to it? Is it locked down? And answering that all-encapsulating question is, how secure is my data at any given stage, right? Do you have visibility on that? That is an increasingly difficult question to answer when we think of SaaS applications. And Shadow SaaS, that is kind of a knock-on effect from that as well, right? So Shadow SaaS can be described as simply as the SaaS applications that you can't see or you don't know about. So think of you could have a number of different situations. So think of an individual who works in your organization that likes to use certain applications that they don't access through their Oktas or single sign-ons or whatnot, right? They use it for their day-to-day tasks. Or as previously mentioned, extensions that operate on applications that you're unaware about. And, let's say that gets deleted or knocked off, or employee moves company or employee moves role, you could be at a serious case of a lot of data loss, because a lot of data could be housed there and it was not through the, authoritative processes of that application, and there's a lot of data loss, just rendering a slowdown in your productivity. The other side of that is risk, right? If you did have a breach, if there was a situation or you did get audited, and there's this discovery of all this sensitive data on applications that is unapproved or don't have the correct security protocols in place, how liable are you to that, right? And then, of course, just increased costs. Individuals using these applications or extensions that you're unaware of, that don't go through your assessment processes, have a knock-on effect because they're paying for licenses here and there. And you don't have a governing view on that as an organization. As we say, it can be individual or organizational led procurement processes. The next challenge then is managing SaaS security risk. And this is really time consuming and really complex, to the point where a lot of people just don't put the resources into it right now because they're unaware of how to approach it at the given moment. So think of things like, you probably heard of the term, the shared responsibility model when we think of infrastructure as a service, right? Well, the same shared responsibility model applies to SaaS applications, right? Just because you procure a SaaS application, it doesn't mean the default settings are securing your data. The security of your data still you're responsible for that. And things like default settings, excess privileges, using that least privilege approach is still pertinent. And you really need to know what you need to lock down in terms of compliance and best practices. So it's a real challenge trying to understand where your weak points are, because you may have a situation where you have a lot of applications and you just simply don't know where to secure. That's a challenge. The last challenge then also is managing SaaS spend. We hear time and time again from our customers and prospects around this escalating SaaS spend. It's out of control and we don't know how to manage it. And that could be from a whole host of things, like I've already mentioned, around Shadow SaaS that we mentioned earlier, right? Applications you're unaware of, small licenses here and there. But if you're a company with small margins and each department is eating into a little bit of that margin, collectively as an organization, your margins are being, eaten up by these small percentages that you may not even need, right? Orphaned accounts, people just creating local accounts to do things, using up licenses that are no longer functional or needed, and a simple cleanup on your applications would reduce that. Redundant inactive accounts, right? Accounts that are just no longer there, no longer needed. Once upon a time they were there, maybe they left the company or division and they need to be got rid of as well. And duplicate licensing. Maybe you have several licenses for the same person, or another way of looking at this will be two applications that do the same function. If you combine those, you get a better premium, that type of thing. And they're the top challenges that we face and what we see in this kind of section or industry. And I'm going to talk you through some of the approaches and solutions for that. Jerry Beeson, you saw a tweet from him earlier. He's a great thought leader, and I thought he encapsulated the challenge quite well. So he describes the challenge as a blend of problems. And the blend of problems is, like we've kind of alluded to, which is attacks on security misconfigurations are massively on the rise, right? SaaS consumption has skyrocketed in the last couple of years. And there's hundreds of applications, both sanctioned and unsanctioned, with unique configurations and user management options that people struggle with, right? So if you're not fully sure how to secure your app, and you have more apps than you know what to do with, and attacks are on the rise, it's just a matter of time, right? So trying to get ahead of this is key. So what I've done is I've broken down the challenge into 3 sections here, right? So we can step through the challenge and the solutions, right? So step 1 is breadth, right? And what we mean by breadth is discovery, right? So this is about, the very first step is you need to get an inventory of all your SaaS applications. We need to be able to discover them, the ones we expect and know about, and the ones we have gone through assessment and procurement processes and we know they're there. But more importantly, the ones that we didn't know were there, the ones that people are using that we're unaware of, that are processing data that we don't want, and things like that. And then we need to discover all of those before making any decisions. Right now in today's market, there are solutions out there that help aid some of this. So you probably heard of the term CASB, cloud access security brokers, things like that. And CASBs, they do allow security teams to control how users access the applications, but they can quite often take a user-centric approach, and it doesn't account for the settings within the application itself, right? It kind of blocks you from accessing it or not. What if you have access, but the settings individually are not correct? It also doesn't help with the cost optimization part, so not really useful for finance. However, good for that access. SMP is probably a lesser known solution, software management platforms. These really manage the day-to-day of SaaS operations and improve employee experiences, onboarding, offboarding, things like that, tracking usage, and have visibility into cost optimizations. But they don't really provide a robust information on misconfigurations, data flow types, user access levels and permissions, detailed security risk around compliance levels and things like that on the vendors themselves. Right, so there's a whole heap of drawbacks and limitations surrounding these solutions as well, albeit they're providing the service they provide. And really, with this discovery stage, what you're trying to answer is, are there any applications in my environment that employees are using that I do not know about? Right, which Shadow SaaS apps are employees using? Right, give me the visibility so I can make informed decisions. Right, if you have that piece down, let's look at the second level of the challenge. The second level is depth. And what we mean by depth, we mean configuration. So you've got your core applications for your business, right? Whether it be your 365s, your CRMs, things like this, right? The things your company absolutely everyone and organizationally must use for the organization to function correctly, right? Use this for all manner of things. And for that, we have around the configuration to make sure we're following best practice, we have what we call SSPMs, which are SaaS Security Posture Management tools, right? And they provide automated kind of continuous monitoring of SaaS applications to help security and IT teams minimize risky configurations, right? And manage policies and ensure compliance. That is their function. They don't fully offer visibility into the end user devices that are accessing the applications, meaning security teams only get part of the picture. And it doesn't shed much light into licensing and cost optimization or the visibility part. And quite often they're quite difficult to deploy and implement and manage, right? We've heard that as well. And really what you're trying to answer in this section is there a configuration that allows somebody to do something they shouldn't be able to do, right? And an example here is, does my CRM permissions allow someone to export customer data or whatever it might be, right? Is there any obvious glaring weakness in our environment that we should lock down, right? Because it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack if you're going through this manually. The last part of the challenge then is around context, right? So what if we discover an application that we didn't expect? Is it critical? What if we discover a misconfiguration in place on an application? Is that critical? Should we down tools and everyone fix that first? We need context. And for context, what we need to do is correlate all that data together and come up with kind of a staged criticality of what we should be focusing on and where we should be focusing our efforts. Because there's literally many things you could be doing in here, but we want to make sure what we're doing has the biggest impact in reducing our risk as an organization, right? And for that, we need SaaS management. Now, Exonius will work at all three layers, and we'll go into that in a moment. So we'll work at the visibility layer, that breadth discovery layer. We will work as your SSPM, that middle configuration layer, and work at that contextual correlation layer to showcase what critical things you need to fix first. Okay. So if you have all that, you're really answering that question of, if a breach happened, what's impacted? What could I do today to reduce my blast radius? What could I do today to reduce my risk as an organization? If I got 5 things to do, which 5 things should I do first? Okay. Following on from that, then we'll look at Exonius as a SaaS management solution. So if you look at Exonius, where the comprehensive approach we take will address both the business value by being able to show you where you can make cost savings and where you're overspending, as well as risk management by reducing risk, by finding misconfigurations, finding unsanctioned applications, and bring it together in one platform. And it's a kind of a unique approach on this. And by connecting to all layers of the stack, we're going to be able to discover all of your SaaS applications, and we'll talk about some of the methods of discovery in a moment when I get into the demo. We'll be able to identify misconfigurations and any data security risks that may come up along the way. And we'll be able to deliver insights. So being able to show you where the overspend is, where to focus your efforts and energy in terms of your security teams. And lastly, then, I suppose, the complete solution, right? It's unique, unlike kind of anyone else out there, where we're solving the challenges for IT risk and finance in one platform. Gives full context to all your assets and is built by Exonius. And if you're familiar with our platform to date, we have a very rich history in API integrations. Looking at a case study or an example, and I'll just give a brief on this. You don't need to read this, but it kind of paints the picture, I suppose. We had a software-based company, and their key challenges are like what we said: inability to discover shadow applications, out of control SaaS spend, and unable to identify misconfigurations in core applications. And this was a big problem for them. And upon kind of implementing Exonius, what they were able to do is, get a real complete asset inventory kind of picture, and see a bunch of unsanctioned applications. You can see some of the numbers here on the right-hand side. They came across thousands of previously unknown active extensions into third-party applications. And they were able to discover that there was a bunch of multi-factor authentication settings disabled for user accounts. And by implementing it, they were able to massively reduce their risk as an organization by uncovering some of these major flaws that they previously didn't have visibility into. The Exonius approach to market is we want to be the system of record for your entire digital infrastructure, whether it be assets, users, software, SaaS applications, and everything in between. That is the goal of Exonius. If you're unfamiliar with our platform, and I've just kind of put it into two here, and we're obviously focusing on the one on the right, or at least my right anyway, SaaS management. But as Christoph, I believe, mentioned earlier, we also have the cybersecurity asset management in the platform as well, where we're looking at all type of assets. So as I mentioned, devices, IoT, cloud workloads, SecOps teams, SaaS management, software inventories, things like that, all together. Today, the focus is going to be on SaaS management. However, if you want to know about anything else in our portfolio, or you've seen some of the previous webinars, feel free to reach out to anyone on this list, right? And the contact details are there. Obviously, my own, David Bradley, Channel Account Manager, Anis Abbas, Christoph Kumpa, the Regional Sales Executive, and our partner engineer, Enikayo Engelbert as well. Okay, so if there's not any pressing question, I'll jump straight into the demo. So give me 1 second. Live demoing, so it's bound to throw up a curveball, right? So let's do this. So this is the landing page, and I'll just expand this so you can see where I'm going. This is the landing page in Exonius, right? This is the home page. And like any home page, it's going to show you a nice overview of your landscape, right? How many applications we've discovered, how many users across these applications, how many API extensions. These are API tokens that we see responding to those applications. What's our net spend year on year? And try and get some trending reports on that. And then we can obviously drill down into the further details of all this. Before drilling into all of this, what we want to do is figure out, well, how do we get this all in the first place? Okay. And where I want to start is the interconnectivity page. So if you remember from our slide deck earlier on, we had the breadth, depth, and context. This is this breadth layer. This is this discovery piece, right? So what you can see here is these are all of the applications in your organization in one place. And we're breaking these applications into managed and unmanaged applications. So let's focus first on the managed applications. So these are the applications that you would expect to see in your organization, right? These are the ones that go through single sign-on. These are the ones that you've done an assessment on and organizationally procured and expect employees to use. Okay, and we can see by simply plugging into things like Okta, the G Suite, Azure, AWS, by plugging in our adapters into those 3-4, I call them kings and queens of applications, we can leverage the API to search for all of the other applications that are going through single sign-on and see the responses, and we can discover all those, what we call managed applications, the ones we expect to see. And by, we can obviously zoom in here and we can see how many users are using each application, and we can drill further into that if needed as well. But I'll do that later on, so no point in doing it now. The other side of applications is unmanaged applications. And this is probably more interesting to you as a security practitioner. Unmanaged applications, how do we define that, right? Well, you can see here, there's some applications connected to the G Suite that show up here. Some are connected to Azure, right? These are the ones that are typically not going through single sign-on. Ones we've discovered API, responses and tokens for, but we've not discovered them going through single sign-on or through whatever authorization methods that are in place. So we branch these as maybe unmanaged or unsanctioned applications, right? And you can see with the circle around them, green, amber, and red, whether the vendor itself has a risk associated to it. And I'll talk about that next around vendor risk, but just basically show and highlighting if there's vendors that have a particular risk. Over here on the right-hand side, you'll see a bunch of applications that have no connection to anything. So what are these, right? Well, earlier on, we mentioned like you could use a CASB, right? Cloud Access Security Broker. And if you're using those, we can plug into that and discover any application that it's seeing that maybe isn't showing up through your single sign-on either, right? If you're using our cybersecurity asset management platform. There's a backend integration there, so we can see if a user is using an application and have it show up here. You don't need those, but if you are using those, we can leverage those as well. Also, DNS management logs, right? Being able to look at those to see is there any apps showing up, or connecting directly into expense management software. Think of Expensify, SAP Concur, all these type of applications. If you're using those, we can plug into those to see is there any spend on applications from users and have them show up here. And again, highlight if there's a risk associated to them. So for example, you could say, hey, at a vendor level, very high level, show me all of my unmanaged applications that have a high risk score, something like that. And I can see here's a bunch of high risk vendors that are in my environment that users are using. And I can drill in to see how many users are using these to see, do I need to have a further look at this and investigate a little bit further, right? But we'll get into the risk next. So all I want you to take from that is that we can discover all your applications, both managed and unmanaged, right? And get visibility where you previously didn't have it. The second part of the demo is risk. Now we break risk into 3 to 4 different categories. The first level of risk is the vendor itself, right? So usually an organization has some sort of assessment process where you assess a new vendor you're taking on. Maybe you have some stipulations that a vendor needs to be compliant with certain standards or have data security in place, things like that, right? And you do your homework, Google them and do your research to see, are they okay, send out your, your questionnaires and whatnot. And this is really where this is going to help. So on all of our pages, you're going to see this top level report, and you can toggle this on and off if you wish. But basically it's showing you, hey, overall, all of our discovered applications, show me the ones that fit into risk, high, low, medium risk categories based on the security that's in place there. Show me how these calculate across SOC 2 or ISO standards and whatnot. And again, this is not your organization. This is the vendors themselves. We will do compliance in your organization later, but right now we're just looking at the vendors themselves and how compliant are those vendors with certain compliance standards. Okay. And again, an overview and a breakdown of data encryption levels, data retention, bug bounty programs, things like that. All right. So how does this work? Well, let me just go to the repository and let me look for something. Jira is probably a well-known application. And let me just look at this if it loads for me. So Jira is probably well known for ticketing tools and workflow tools and incident management. And what we're doing here is we're pulling from publicly available information. Nothing special going on here other than we're just pulling the public documents for you, doing a lot of the heavy legwork to say, here's an overview of the company of Jira. Here is, the standards Jira say they have in place. Here's some of the policies and reports if you want to download and read them. There's security policies, password policies, things like that. And here's the product security to have in place and data security to have in place. If there's been any events or incidences recently in the news, show them here as well, right? And over here, then you have, all in all, this is a low risk to bring into your environment, but of course you can edit this. So let's say you're bringing in an application that's of high risk, but you're only putting it in a testing environment and it's not really a concern. You can address this or put in business criticality risks, things, custom tags like that. So you can customize this if need be, just to help in your reports to see if there's any new high risk vendors after appearing in your environment that you weren't aware of. Okay, so that's really what that is. The second level of risk is users, right? Now, users fall into 2 categories. You have fingers to keyboard and you have app to app. So fingers to keyboard, meaning me and you, right? And how we use our applications. And we're pulling this via our adapters and our APIs to get a list of all the users that are across your application infrastructure. So we can see here's Abigail Simmons. If I pop it open, I could see all the applications she has access to. And I can start to see, how we discovered it via these tags. So I can see we're directly connected to this application, or we discovered it through single sign-on, or here's one that we've discovered it's unmanaged. We've picked it up through other methods, not through single sign-on or direct connection to the application. This is maybe an unsanctioned app in our environment, that type of thing. Now that's all well and good individually, but you're not really going to go through this individually in a larger corporation. So what we have up here are the idea of tags. And what we can start to do is shadow tags is one I'll go through here. is you could start to say, show me all of the users who are unmanaged, i.e. not going through single sign-on in their applications, or inactive accounts. So the user actually hasn't logged into the application in 90 days or more. Unused accounts. So show me all the users across my applications or a particular application who has never logged in. Like, why do they have a license? Why do they have an account if they don't use the product? Unlinked and orphaned. So an orphaned account, where this might resonate is, imagine you're like a Salesforce house, right? And you have a Salesforce admin who's creating local accounts to do some function, but they just simply don't clean it up. So orphaned is the user exists in the application, but is not existing in single sign-on. And the inverse of that is unlinked, which is it exists in single sign-on, but not in the application itself. So, trying to clean up those floating accounts that are around there. So what you could start to do actually is look at things like, and we mentioned Salesforce, right? I mean, let's have a look at this. Let's try this. So show me all the Salesforce accounts that are shadow users that have admin permissions, right? And I'm going to go to the detailed view here. So I can just see the Salesforce. So I can see here's 80 users who are either inactive, orphaned, unused, things like that, that have admin permissions at some level, right? And we can actually drill further into the users to look at their permissions. So I can say, here's Joseph Collins or Kyle Ortega, orphaned and inactive. Why do they exist and what do they have access to? And this will actually tell me what data sets in Salesforce they have access to, and what permission sets they have, right? And we can, from here, we can obviously download this and send it to our Salesforce admin, or we can do a cleanup on this. But having a dig in and look around to see, should this really exist? Is this an attack path for someone to leverage? If this is an orphaned account just floating around with a bunch of admin access? Or do we want to instantly go ahead from here and suspend the user, right? So we can suspend the user directly from here in Salesforce. Say, right, they haven't used it, they've never logged in, they've got a bunch of admin permissions. I'm going to suspend this user, and I'm going to send a notification or alert over to our admin team to have a look at this. Okay. The second part of users then is extensions. And this is app to app, right? So previously we were saying, here's a user, that has admin permissions that have not used the account, clean it up. Now we're looking at app to app. And app to app is a bit more difficult because you're kind of shooting in the blind because it's not something you're familiar with, right? And the same thing again, what we can start to do is look and using our tags to say, show me if there's inactive extensions, meaning the extension hasn't been used in 90 days, or, inactive extensions with inactive users and things like that. Or maybe they have permission sets that are overreaching, meaning more than just looking at the user accounts, etc. Maybe they have permissions that shouldn't be there, right? So let me show you an example of this, maybe, where I'll say, show me all of the apps extensions that have extended permissions that are just more beyond just looking at users, and they have access to the drive at some level, and show me on Azure, maybe. I think there's some Azure data here. Yeah, okay, here's some. Let me drill into this. It'll make more sense when you see it. So here's one, right? There's Calendly, bunch of, Jira Cloud for Excel, right? So let me drill into this. So the application here is Azure, and the extension is used by Jira is called Jira Cloud for Excel, right? And I can see that there's 4 users, Alison, Meredith, Nathan, and Jacob, using this extension, right? Maybe this is sanctioned or unsanctioned, right? We can drill into that later. But there's 4 users. One of the users is actually inactive, so it doesn't actually use the extension. And I can see it's got extended permissions with some access to the drive. So let's have a look at this. So if I open up this, I can see that there's some offline access. He has read-write access to the files in the drive, and user read access as well, right? So maybe this is something that we need to download. Maybe we need to forward this to someone to have a look. Do they need all this access? Or maybe we can go ahead and just delete the extension directly from here, meaning we're going to delete this Jira Cloud for Excel extension for Nathan Kane in Azure, and start to tidy up very quickly, very easy, obvious security holes. Okay. The next part, right, moving away from users, is that, you remember in the breadth, depth context, right? This is more in the depth, which is around configuration on the applications themselves, right? So now when we spoke about compliance of the vendors that you're bringing into your organization, what about your organization, right? So we connect to these core applications using our adapters, and we look at how these SaaS applications are configured, and then show you the high impact configurations and interesting configurations that are misconfigured. And again, we've got this toggle here that we can hide charts and shows charts, but I think this one is quite useful. So over here, we can see you've got 332, 166 are configured correctly. Out of the ones that are configured correctly, 23% are high impact. A lot of the mediums are correctly configured. But if I look at the misconfigured settings, 40% of my misconfigured settings are of high security impact, high risk impact. And these are toggled here with the red and green state. So red meaning misconfigured, green meaning configured correctly, right? And we can then see over here how you stand up against different benchmarks. So whether it's CIS, whether it's PCI DSS, SOC 2, for example, things like that. So what you could effectively do is say, show me how I stand up against SOC 2 as an organization, or show me how I stand up against SOC 2 for a particular application. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is I can say, show me all of the misconfigured items in Salesforce, and I can see that, you know, my SOC 2 compliance with on my Salesforce account is at 75%. Here's 41 settings that I could configure correctly to dramatically increase my SOC 2 compliance. And this is, you can see how easy this is to use, right? So let's look at one of these even better, right? This is where you're going to get some drawbacks from other tools, and where we kind of differentiate ourselves here as well, right? Is looking at the misconfigurations. Let's look at this first one, password reuse, enforced password history, right? Let's look at the details here. So I can see that there's a configuration called enforced password history, right? And there was multiple values found in your Salesforce and your organizational Salesforce application. The recommended configuration is to be 5 or above. And here's a link that will bring you directly into that setting in Salesforce, your Salesforce, that link there. And here's a link to some of the documentation around this. And here's a list of all the security standards that this configuration shows up in and where you would find it in those standards. Okay. It said there was multiple values found. So if I look individually, I can actually see all the different roles that have different values set, and I can go to each setting individually if I wish, directly to go in and make a change there. Okay. And this, you know, as a knock-on, will dramatically reduce your risk and increase your compliance and reduce your risk of data leaks and things like that as well. And you can go through all of these and filter these whichever way you want. Okay. Now, I'll get to the context bit in the end, but before that, I want to switch a little bit towards spending. All right. So we're looking at our spending, and this is our cost optimization dashboard and where you can make cost savings in your applications. So we're looking at what is our spend over a time period, maybe over the last 9 months, 12 months. We're, you know, a high level view of which applications have the highest spend increase year on year, which applications that have the highest amount of inactive page users versus total page users, what's the most expensive applications I have and licenses that I have, and looking at all things like that at a high level. What we can do is drill down into each application and all the licenses rolling up into that application, so I can see which ones I have and what the costs are in the last year, to see has there been any deviations from that. I can look at individual transactions if I want to get real granular. So get a breakdown of my SaaS applications, you know, per different category, each application individually, and have a look over time and actually look at the transactions on an individual basis. So in this instance, we're locked into Expensify, looking at, you know, the different applications and who is making the transactions, and the description for them and what dates, that type of thing. Licenses is a good thing here. And I'll show you a pretty neat thing you can do here. You can obviously filter this down per application and account and things like that. But to show you an example, let me see this one. Yeah, here's a good one. So what we can start to do is say very easily, hey, I've got a license for 365 here. It's costing me X amount a month. And when it's up for, you know, renewal, and how many users I have. And now of those users that I have in this license, how many of them are suspended, deleted, unused, or inactive? versus how many are active. So is there any real obvious cost savings I can make there if I am paying for 20, 30, 40% more users than is actually using this product? Do I need that? Right? And start to look at things that way. And then just to, I suppose to finish up on this is findings. This is the context piece, right? So what we're looking at here in the findings section is we've looked at interconnectivity, applications, users and extensions and policies. And what we're saying here is we don't care whether it's a misconfigured item or a vendor risk or a extended permissions issue. What we want to do is categorize the highest severity risk of things to look at here. And we have these pre-built set of rules, which you can turn on and off. But we're saying from this module in the extensions module, we found active extensions of inactive users. That is of critical impact. We have found misconfigured role level settings of high impact in the policy section. And we can start to drill into these, and you can even start to filter these down. So show me only critical risks on particular applications, managed or unmanaged applications, etc. And start to drill into that. And what we can do from here is we can start to set up automation, create webhooks into your ticketing system, send someone a Slack message, email, etc. And we can really drill into the individual findings as well if we wanted to figure out here's all the misconfigured role level settings and who they're for, and even go ahead and start creating some sort of, again, ticketing system or directly connecting to your Jira system or something like that. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a nice overview of the solution today. And yeah, that's kind of a wrap for me, if you will. So open to any questions or any discussion points that you may have.
Thank you very much, David. Great presentation. Thank you very much. So we also have some questions here. So the first one is, where can I see what applications I can connect to?
Yeah, so the applications that you can connect to, these can all be found on our website. I think I have the website page open. So if you go to our website and go to platform, you'll see what we call adapters and view adapters. And we have our adapters broken down by, our asset management tool and our SaaS management tool. And if you click into there, it's going to show you the list of adapters that we have today. If you have something that doesn't list there, just reach out. The chances are we have it already, and maybe it's just not updated or whatnot. But yeah, you'll find a list of adapters here.
Okay, then the next one is with regards to spending. Can we compare applications to see if there are apps with similar functionalities?
Yeah, so that's probably something I didn't cover in great detail, right? Which is, earlier I mentioned, like, quite often the budget for SaaS applications can be interdepartmental. So imagine you have a sales team and a development team, right? They might have budgets for their own applications that, this side don't know what this side have. So imagine you have applications that are of different vendors but do the same functionality. And sales are paying a premium because they're 500 users short of getting a 20% discount. And dev are 300 short of getting a discount on their side, but they're using pretty much the same functions in the app. Is there a way we can look at what we're spending our money on to combine that to get a reduced premium, right? And that's how I would encapsulate that. And how we could do here is we could look at things like, look at the application spend, and we could break this up by category, right? So we could say, I don't know, maybe I have some data for finance here. Right. So I'm saying, show me all the applications under the category of finance and see how much I'm paying for each of those. So how much am I paying for Expensify versus Concord, that type of thing, and how many kind of users are in there, and start to look at that. So you can start to cross compare, is there applications that are doing combined features, or you can even look at it individually if you want. You can literally type in the names of the applications. But if you're unsure, you can start to look at category and break it down that way.
Okay, then the next one is, can Axonius report on renewals as well?
Yeah, so I didn't go into it here. It's a pretty straightforward enough thing, right? So if you have renewals coming up, a lot of people use some sort of sheets or notification process, right? But what we can start to do here is, by connecting directly to the applications or the expense management softwares, we can see what licenses they have and when they're coming up for renewals. Perhaps maybe you have trial licenses that you don't want it to expire because it's going to automatically start taking money from you. So what you can start to do here is add in renewals or populate it automatically to see what's coming up from month to month. So I know in May I've got these renewals. I know in July I've got these renewals. If I wanted to put something in manually for September, for example, I can put that in as well. And it just works as a real easy reporting system, you know, and alert me when something's coming up, that type of thing.
Okay, and then the last one for today is, can the tool look at behavioral analytics?
Yeah, so this is probably the most recent addition to us. Under logs and analytics, it probably requires a longer conversation, but under logs and analytics, what we can start to do is look at behavioral patterns. So let me give you a situation. Imagine you're a company, right? And you don't expect any, what would you say, any access. You use Okta, for example, right? So you're using Okta and you as a company say, I don't expect anyone to be logging in from France or Algeria or the US or whatever it might be, right? So you can quite easily link this to Okta, look at the behavioral analytics and start to see where events are coming from, right? If they're marked in white on the globe, it means there's none, but if they're marked in green, it means there's some, and if they're marked in purple, it means special events related to security, right? So what I can start to do here is, here's all of the events. There's going to be a lot I don't care about, but what I have to do is say, show me, you remember when we were looking at findings, and findings were security, interesting security related findings. What I can start to do here is, here's all the events. Show me events that relate to findings, related to security issues. And now I can see that my globe is very focused on security related events, moreover than just straightforward standard events, which may be of interest if you didn't expect someone to log in from a certain location, right? But ones that maybe even relate further into security related issues. So I can see here's one where the actor is, you know, Deborah admin, who has granted some user privilege to a particular user, right? And I can actually dive directly from here into the findings page, which brings me down to the individual finding, which says, right, here, there were some admin permissions added to this user account from Deborah to this particular user account. You know, hey, maybe I want to, you know, I want to set this to in process, and I want to actually go ahead and create some sort of an action around this. You know, whether it be alert someone, create a ticket, or, you know, simply alert someone, say, hey, is this correct? Should this have been done? And basically a way of constantly keeping up to date with what's going on. Okay.
All right. So thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Christoph, for the whole presentation and demo. And thank you also very much for the attendees who hold long till the end. And we wish you all a great afternoon and a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sean. Bye-bye.